What does a Goethe novel from the 1700s have in common with the sunny 2000s in Toronto? Well, young Werther ties it all together. It's a new Canadian rom-com starring Toronto actress Alison Pill. And our film columnist Jason Gorber is here to give us the lowdown. Good morning.
Good morning to you, sir. How are you?
Not too bad. It's Friday. So the film has been getting lots...
It is a Friday. It's a very Friday.
It's been getting lots of positive attention. So tell me about young Werther.
Young Werther is a remake of this 1774 incredibly depressing novel about like this love triangle that goes very, very wrong, and it's very overwrought. Typical Germanic, one of those like Dermot Strong novels where everything goes to heck. And then this first-time filmmaker out of Toronto, José Lourenço, put together the structure of the film, of this dynamic between this young guy who comes in from West Mountain, Montreal, takes the train with his little liege, shows up, and he's got one day in Toronto and then at a cafe, played by Douglas Booth, this very, very beautifully cheekboned British actor, and he shows up and he sees, and he does what everybody in the city does, is he shows up at a cafe, sees Alison Pill, and falls in love. And why wouldn't you? And so Alison Pill plays Charlotte, but inconveniently, Alison is engaged to a very successful but very busy lawyer, played by Patrick Adams, this guy named Albert, and thus the dynamic is set in play. Does she allow herself to be swooned, to be wooed by this young Werther who has shown up and has, this laissez-faire attitude as he's like wandering the city and asking her to feel and delve into her passions, or the stability that Mr. Albert actually provides, despite the fact that he is spending all his time on pro bono work, and taking time and shooting guns at gun ranges and all the stuff, all the stuff from 1700s Berlin transplanted somehow into Toronto as they're walking on Front Street and going to cafes and going to Little Italy and going to somewhere at somebody's insanely perfect cottage, I presume on Lake Muskoka. It all comes together in this relatively light, relatively fluffy, but entirely engaging retelling of a very depressing novel reset in a way that absolutely would fit with a 90s rom-com. And so, you have this weird collision all together in this version of young Werther that has come out here in this day and age.
Well, what makes this work? Because there's a lot happening here as you describe it.
Alison Pill.
Just her.
They're all great, but look, I have said this before. I've said this on air before. Goon is the greatest film our country has ever produced. I think Goon is a masterpiece. And so much of that is when you get these sort of tonal challenges between completely silly and completely believable. And Alison Pill plays such an integral role to that. So my biases are absolutely on the table. But I think the film is good to decent with, I think, really strong performances and definitely worth seeing. There's a surrealism, especially if you're in Toronto, of seeing all these Toronto locations. We're sort of very cynical. I mean, it's a lot of times Toronto always plays New York, plays Chicago, plays, X-Menville, wherever it's going to be. But for this to be unapologetically Torontonian and to have the weird dynamic of the person coming from Montreal and realizing, ooh, I'm in the big city, is quite adorable. The direction's okay. The cinematography is fine. The editing's okay. But really, this is due to committed performances by people elevating what's really kind of, in some ways, a silly translation of this story into something a little bit more light, a little bit more farcical. There's actually a line where it actually reflects about the fact that this isn't going to be as dire as an 18th century German novel. But really, she is so, so great that you understand why somebody would be so smitten by her, and understand why he would blow up his life. Both of them would blow up their lives in order to be anywhere in her presence. And so we we are blessed to have her as a performer that continues to do stuff in and around the city and internationally. But she's such an incredible talent. I mean, she's Iris Apatow shows up, Judd Apatow's daughter. She's not in it for a lot. She's a great actress. Other people are great, but honestly, if all we have to do on this show is celebrate all things Alison Pill, I'm here for it.
Okay. In other news, I mean, we've been following some devastating news in Los Angeles about the fires that are happening there. What are you hearing from your friends and contacts in LA right now about how that's impacting them?
Yeah, it's crazy. I have lots of people that I know have had to flee the fires, some people that have actually lost their homes. It's really crazy. I just saw on the news, I think an hour and a half ago, a drone, like somebody was flying a personal drone, and it took out one of the Canadian planes that's actually doing firefighting down there. Just completely surreal when you think about LA as all these people, taking it's a place where people shoot photography and their own stuff, the sort of initiative to get up there, and some silly person who decided to interfere with the actual comings and goings of the firefighting has now taken out one of the main tools being used for firefighting. That's one of the surrealisms that you get, that here you have Hollywood. You literally have the Hollywood sign with fire behind it. It's very surreal. It's very shocking. There's, look, the people who've lost their homes, the people who've lost their lives are obviously the absolute focus. But I'm a Critics' Choice Association member. We've had to shift our awards show. Oscar voting is in the midst of taking place now. All of that is sort of being shifted as well. This will settle. Things will sort of... If LA is one thing, it is somewhere where it recovers from whatever destruction and actually comes together. I have no doubt whatsoever that it will continue to move forward. But it is a very, very challenging time for the industry there right now. So many things are shooting in places like Toronto. And so you have, for this perspective, this very narrow perspective of what it's like being a movie person looking at what's taking place in LA, this is not good. And as fires continue, as places like Studio City or even Burbank are under threat, you're going to see just institutions. LA is a place that doesn't have a lot of history building-wise. Doesn't have a lot of places that they actually hold on to the stuff like we do. We're blessed here in Toronto. And the fact that so many of these places now, these central places are destroyed, plus the homes, the crew, like we hear about the stars, but the hundreds and thousands of people that actually make the industry work being affected, plus everybody else that lives in LA, my thoughts are out to all of them. And I do hope that everything sort of calms down and just a recognition about how tenuous things are these days.
All right. Jason, thanks so much for this.
All the best. Take care.
Jason Gorber, A's Metro Mornings movie columnist and editor-in-chief of ThatShelf.com.
That Shelf.